A bolt of lightning illuminated the sky above the family farm of Jonathan Blackwood, stark flashes casting long shadows across the overgrown yard. He stood by his kitchen window, a coffee mug forgotten in his grip, as the rumble of thunder echoed through the countryside. The old house groaned around him, protesting the wind that howled through the gaps in the weather-beaten exterior. 3 long years, 3 years since Evelyn's passing, and still, the emptiness within the house threatened to consume him. His medical credentials gathered dust in an upstairs drawer, as did the unused equipment in his former home office. The thought of tending to another patient after his inability to save his spouse was unbearable. Another flash of lightning jolted him from his thoughts. Something stirred at the edge of his property near the line of oak trees. Jonathan squinted through the rain-streaked window, setting his coffee aside. There was a form that didn't belong amidst the wind-tossed branches. Probably just a fallen log, he muttered to himself, but his feet were already carrying him towards the door. The tempest roared as he stepped out onto the porch, the rain immediately soaking through his shirt. The medical instincts he tried so hard to suppress surged to life as he approached the tree line. The lightning revealed a figure crumpled in the mud. A woman. As Jonathan got closer, his breath caught in his throat. Her skin possessed an iridescent quality, almost translucent, marked with geometric patterns that weren't tattoos. Severe burns covered most of her visible flesh, and her clothing, if it could be called that, seemed made from some living material that pulsed faintly with its own inner light. Jonathan knelt beside her, his professional training overriding his initial shock. "Can you hear me?" Her eyes fluttered open, revealing pupils unlike any he had ever witnessed, kaleidoscopic and definitely not human. Her breath came in ragged gasps. "Help," she managed to utter in perfect English, although her voice held an otherworldly resonance. "Please?" Jonathan's mind raced through the possibilities, each more improbable than the last, yet one thing remained clear: she was dying. "I'm going to move you," he stated, sliding his arms under her. "Try to stay with me." Her skin was feverishly hot against his as he lifted her. She felt surprisingly light considering her height was nearly equal to his. By the time he reached his house, her breathing had become even more labored. In his makeshift medical space, Jonathan gently placed her on the examination table. His hands moved with practiced precision as he assessed her injuries. The burns defied any conventional medical understanding, appearing to shimmer and shift under his touch. "What happened to you?" he inquired, reaching for supplies. Her eyes locked onto his, intense despite her weakness. "Crash," pursued, "had to land," each word seemed to require an immense effort. "You're not from around here, are you?" The question felt absurd even as he asked it, but he needed to keep her conscious while he worked. A weak smile curved her lips. "Further than you think." Her hand caught his wrist with unexpected strength. "Standard methods won't work. Need compatible life force." Jonathan's gaze fell on his old blood transfusion equipment. "Blood? You need blood?" She nodded, almost imperceptibly. "Risk for you, but only chance." Jonathan stared at the equipment, then at his unexpected patient. Everything he knew about medicine screamed that this was impossible, dangerous, and potentially fatal for both of them. But he'd already failed to save one life that truly mattered. He couldn't bear to watch another die, even if she wasn't human. "I'm Jonathan," he said, rolling up his sleeve, "and I'm going to save your life." The old transfusion equipment hummed to life, a sound that transported Jonathan back to his hospital days. He worked swiftly, inserting the needle into his arm first, watching his blood flow through the tubing. The stranger's skin appeared to ripple as he approached with the second needle. This might hurt, he warned, although he wasn't certain if pain held the same meaning for her species. Her skin felt strangely elastic under his fingers as he located a vein. Her eyes followed his movements. "Your kindness." She managed between breaths. "Why?" Jonathan paused, the needle hovering above her arm. "Because it's the right thing to do," he stated, inserting the needle, watching as his blood began flowing into her system, "and because I've seen enough death." The effect was almost instantaneous. Where his blood entered her body, her skin began to glow with a soft, pulsating light that spread throughout her geometric patterns. Her breathing steadied, but her eyes remained fixed on him with an intensity that made him uneasy. "I should check your burns," he said, reaching for gauze. Her hand shot out, catching his wrist. The movement was fluid and precise, startling him. "Wait," she said, her voice stronger now, "watch." Before his eyes, the burned tissue began to regenerate. The process was unlike anything he'd seen in human medicine. Her skin seemed to crystallize and reform, the patterns realigning like living circuitry. "Remarkable," he breathed, his medical curiosity overriding his caution. "Your species has interesting healing properties," she said, her voice gaining strength. A small smile touched her lips. "I'm Lyra." Thunder crashed outside, making Jonathan jump. He'd almost forgotten about the storm. Her eyes followed his movement with obvious interest. "You respond to loud sounds with fear?" she asked, tilting her head. Startled, not afraid, Jonathan corrected, finding himself oddly defensive. "It's a natural response." "Interesting," Lyra's lips curved into what might have been amusement. "Where I come from, such sounds are used in celebration." "You're certainly far from home, then." Jonathan began cleaning up the medical supplies, trying to maintain a professional demeanor despite the surreal situation. "Yes," her voice softened, "though your home has appeal." Her eyes wandered around the room, taking in the worn but well-maintained medical equipment. "You are a healer?" "I was a doctor," Jonathan corrected, his throat tightening. Lyra pushed herself up to a sitting position, her movements becoming more graceful as her strength returned. "Such skills don't leave with time." "Some things do," he turned away, organizing supplies that didn't need organizing. "Your pain," she said quietly, "it radiates from you like thermal waves." Jonathan stiffened. "I don't need an alien diagnosis." "No," she agreed, and something in her tone made him turn back. She was watching him with those impossible eyes, a gentle understanding in their depths. "But perhaps you need an outsider's perspective." Their gazes held for a moment too long, and Jonathan felt heat rise to his face. He looked away first, clearing his throat. "You should rest. Whatever my blood did, you've been through trauma." "Your blood did more than you know," she murmured, but when he looked at her questioningly, she simply smiled. "Rest sounds appropriate." Thunder rolled again outside, but this time it felt less threatening, almost companionable in the quiet room. The following morning, Jonathan found Lyra standing in his living room, bathed in the early sunlight that seemed to dance across her iridescent skin. She had wrapped herself in one of his old blankets, the fabric draping like an elegant gown around her tall frame. "Your star," she said without turning, her voice filled with wonder. "It's quite beautiful." "The sun," Jonathan paused in the doorway, coffee mugs in hand. "I suppose I never thought about it that way." She turned to face him, and his breath caught. Her skin was glowing softly, creating patterns of light that shifted like the aurora borealis. The air around her seemed charged with a gentle static that made the hairs on his arm stand up. "You're glowing," he managed, setting the cups down. "A side effect of your blood," she accepted the coffee with curious interest. "My species adapts quickly to new genetic material. Though I must admit, your particular chemistry has created some unexpected reactions." She brought the cup to her nose, inhaling deeply. The gesture was so human, it made him smile. "It's not poison, I promise." "Oh, I know." Her eye sparkled with mischief over the rim of the cup. "I analyzed your blood composition while you slept." "You what? Is that not customary?" She took a sip, and her eyes widened with delight. "This is wonderful. The molecular structure is so complex. Most people just say it tastes good." Jonathan found himself chuckling despite his bewilderment. "Most people lack the ability to appreciate its true beauty." She moved closer to him, and the static charge intensified, just as they might miss the beauty and other things. Her direct gaze made his heart skip a beat. "You're very forward. Should I be backward?" She tilted her head, genuine confusion crossing her features. "That seems inefficient." "No, I meant." Jonathan ran a hand through his hair, flustered. On Earth, people usually take more time to get to know each other. Ah, she nodded sagely, like how you took time to decide whether to save my life. That was different. Was it? She stepped closer still, her otherworldly eyes searching his face. You acted on instinct, on what felt right, as do I. The air between them crackled with that strange energy. Jonathan found himself studying her features, the geometric pattern shifting beneath her skin, the unusual angle of her cheekbones, the way her eyes seemed to hold entire galaxies. Why did you really come to Earth? He asked softly. Her expression sobered. Because my world is at war, a war over what we should become, who we should be. She sat down, her coffee cup clattering slightly, her movement suddenly less fluid. I refused to choose a side, so both sides chose to hunt me. And now you're here. Now I'm here, she smiled, but there was sadness in it, in the home of a healer who no longer heals, drinking bitter beans and watching your star rise. Coffee, he corrected automatically, they're coffee beans. Her laugh was like wind chimes. You focus on the small correction rather than the larger observation, fascinating. It's easier than talking about why I stopped practicing medicine. Perhaps, she reached out her fingertips, almost touching his chest right over his heart, the air hummed between them, or perhaps you're ready to talk about it but haven't found the right person to listen. Jonathan's heart thundered against Lyra's almost touching fingertips, the air between them crackled with that strange energy that seemed to follow her everywhere now. Before he could respond to her offer to listen, a sharp gasp escaped her lips. She stumbled backward, her luminescent skin flaring bright enough to cast shadows. Lyra? He reached for her, medical instincts kicking in. What's wrong? Your blood, she whispered, pressing both hands to her abdomen. The compatibility was too perfect. What do you mean? Cold fear gripped him. Is it hurting you? Her kaleidoscope eyes met his, filled with wonder and fear in equal measure. It's creating your genetic material. It triggered our reproductive process. Jonathan's mind went blank. That's impossible for humans. Perhaps, she straightened, her glow pulsing in rhythm with her words, but my species evolves through genetic absorption. Compatible DNA can initiate cellular transformation. Her lips curved in a slight smile. You've given me more than just healing, Jonathan Blackwood. He sank into the nearest chair, running his hands through his hair. Are you saying you're pregnant? She completed his thought, yes, with what my people would call a star child, an evolutionary leap forward. But we didn't, he gestured vaguely, his face flushing. Lyra's laugh tinkled through the room. Your Earth concepts of reproduction are so charmingly limited. She moved closer, the static charge intensifying, though I find myself curious about them. This isn't funny, Jonathan protested, even as his pulse quickened at her proximity. You're telling me my blood somehow made you pregnant. In essence, she perched on the arm of his chair, her shoulder brushing his, though her made implies passivity. My biology chose your genetic pattern, found it worthy. Worthy? He turned to face her, suddenly aware of how close she was. I'm a failed doctor who couldn't save his own wife, there's nothing worthy about that. Yet you saved me without hesitation. Her fingers found his chin, tilting his face up. The touch sent sparks across his skin. Your worth isn't measured by your losses, Jonathan. Before he could respond, a low rumble shook the house, different from thunder, deeper, more mechanical. Lyra's skin flared bright, then dimmed erratically. They're scanning, she whispered, all playfulness gone. The pregnancy, it creates a unique energy signature. They'll detect it soon. Who? Your people? Both sides of the war. She stood, moving to the window. And your government has already found my crash site. I can feel their machines searching. Jonathan joined her at the window. In the distance, black helicopters dotted the horizon. We need to hide you. Us, she corrected, turning to face him, this child carries your genetic pattern too. They'll want both of us. Their eyes met, and Jonathan saw the weight of her words in those swirling, otherworldly depths. Everything in him screamed that this was insane: aliens, genetic reproduction, government conspiracies. But as he watched her skin shimmer with concern, he realized he'd already made his choice the moment he found her in the storm. "The old Henderson farm," he said finally. "It's abandoned, but the storm cellar is solid, underground. It might help mask your energy signature." Lyra's face lit up, literally. Clever Earth materials could provide adequate shielding. She stepped closer, her head tilting curiously. "You're not running away." "Should I be?" "Most would." Her hand found his chest again, this time making contact. The spark between them was immediate and intense. "Your heart rate increases when I touch you." Jonathan swallowed hard. That's normal when someone you're attracted to. He caught himself too late. Her smile widened. "Attracted? Like a gravitational pull?" Never mind." He stepped back, trying to clear his head. "We should focus on keeping you safe." "Us safe," she corrected again, following his movement, "and I find focusing difficult when you're experiencing attraction. It's quite distracting." The sound of military helicopters grew closer, their heavy rotors drowning out the morning bird song. Jonathan peered through the barn's dusty window at the Henderson farm, watching black shapes descend from the sky. "They're here," he whispered, though Lyra had surely sensed them coming. Her skin pulsed with increasingly bright patterns, casting dancing shadows across the weathered wood walls. "Your military lacks subtlety," she observed, moving to stand beside him. The air crackled with her presence, though I suppose that's not their intent. "We could still run," Jonathan offered, but she shook her head, her otherworldly eyes fixed on the approaching forces. "No more running." Her hand found his, sending familiar sparks through his skin. This child deserves better than a life in shadows. Through the window, they watched as soldiers in tactical gear spread out across the property. Their movements were precise, practiced. They'd done this before. "Your heart rate is elevated again," Lyra noted, a hint of amusement in her voice despite the situation. "Not from attraction, this time," Jonathan muttered. "No." She turned to face him, her geometric pattern shifting faster now. "Pity." Before he could respond, a voice boomed through a megaphone. "This is the United States military. We have the building surrounded. Come out with your hands where we can see them." Jonathan took a deep breath. "Ready?" "Almost." Lyra stepped closer, her face inches from his. "First, I require what your people call luck. She kissed him. The contact sent electricity coursing through his body, every nerve ending lighting up like her skin. When she pulled back, his lips tingled with residual energy. "For luck," she explained, looking entirely too pleased with herself. "I've been studying Earth customs." "That's not exactly." Jonathan started, then shook his head with a laugh. "Never mind. Let's do this." They stepped out of the barn together, into the harsh glare of military spotlights. Dozens of laser sights danced across their bodies. Jonathan raised his hand slowly, but Lyra stood tall, her skin beginning to pulse with an otherworldly rhythm. "Stop right there," the megaphone commanded. "My name is Dr. Jonathan Blackwood," he called out clearly, "and we mean no harm." "The female subject is to be contained immediately," a new voice ordered. "Consider her extremely dangerous." "Dangerous?" Lyra's voice carried across the yard with impossible resonance. The soldiers nearest to them swayed slightly. "If I were dangerous, would I do this?" Her skin flared brilliant white, but instead of the harsh tactical lights, it felt soothing, like summer sunshine. Her voice, when she spoke again, carried harmonics that seemed to bypass the ears and go straight to the brain. "Your weapons cannot harm me," she sang more than spoke, "and I could have fled long ago. Instead, I chose to stay, to share, to create something new." The soldiers' grips on their weapons loosened slightly, several lowered their laser sights. Jonathan seized the moment. "She's carrying a child," he announced. "My child. The first of its kind, a bridge between our species." "Are you really going to gun down an unarmed pregnant woman in cold blood?" Hey, what? The megaphone crackled with disbelief. A figure stepped forward, a woman in a crisp military uniform, her insignia marking her as a high-ranking officer. Dr. Blackwood, are you claiming you've bred with this alien? Not in the way you're thinking, Jonathan responded, keeping his voice steady. It's more complex than that. Lyra's voice carried across the yard again, her harmonics making even the stern officer's expression soften. Your species and mine are more compatible than either of us knew. The child I carry represents not invasion, but evolution, cooperation. She crashed here by accident, Jonathan added. She's a refugee, not an invader. I'm a doctor, I saved her life, and in doing so, we discovered something extraordinary. The officer raised her hand, and the soldiers lowered their weapons slightly. Prove it. Lyra stepped forward, her skin pulsing with gentle waves of light. May I approach? I can show you what I mean. After a tense moment, the officer nodded. Lyra walked toward her with fluid grace, the air around her shimmering. When she reached the officer, she took the woman's hand and placed it on her abdomen. The officer gasped. I can feel the future, Lyra completed softly, a child of two worlds. Proof that we're not so different after all. Jonathan watched in amazement as the hardened military commander's face transformed with wonder. The soldier's fingers splayed across Lyra's stomach, feeling the gentle pulse of energy beneath. Stand down, the officer ordered suddenly. All units, stand down. She turned to face Jonathan. Doctor, I believe we have a lot to discuss. Indeed, we do. A new voice cut through the night. Everyone turned to see a tall figure emerge from one of the helicopters, a man in a dark suit who carried himself with unmistakable authority. I'm Director Thomas Reed, Special Projects Division, he announced, walking toward them, and I think it's time we had a conversation about the future of human-alien relations. Lyra's hand found Jonathan's again, squeezing gently. Remember, she whispered, just for him, your attraction isn't the only thing that's distracting. Her skin flickered playfully, drawing a small smile from him despite the tension. Director Reed addressed Lyra directly. I believe we can offer you something better than a barn to stay in, something more official. We stay together, Lyra said firmly, her grip on Jonathan's hand tightening. Where he goes, I go. The director nodded. Of course. Dr. Blackwood's medical expertise will be invaluable for monitoring your unique condition. And what about her safety? Jonathan demanded. Her people might come looking for her. That's precisely why we need to work together, Reed replied. We can protect you both, and in return, you can help us prepare for a future that, quite frankly, none of us were ready for. Your facility, Jonathan said carefully, would it be able to shield her energy signature? Her people have advanced tracking capabilities. Reed's eyebrows raised slightly. We have some of the most sophisticated containment technology on Earth. Though I'm curious, how you know about her energy signature? Because I can feel it growing stronger, Lyra interjected, her skin pulsing brighter. The child, it amplifies everything. She turned to Jonathan, her kaleidoscope eyes intense. We should accept their offer. The barn won't shield us much longer. The military officer who had touched Lyra's abdomen stepped forward. Dr. Blackwood, if I may, what we felt there, that's something unprecedented, something that needs to be protected and studied. Jonathan asked sharply. Understood, Reed corrected. There's a difference. Lyra laughed suddenly, the sound making several soldiers step back as the air crackled around them. Your protectiveness is endearing, Jonathan, but unnecessary. They couldn't harm me if they wanted to, her fingers traced patterns of light in the air, and they don't want to. I can sense their intentions. You can read minds? Reed asked, fascination overtaking his professional demeanor. Emotions, energy patterns, like how I can tell that Jonathan's heart rate increases when I do this. She stepped closer to Jonathan, her skin brightening teasingly. This isn't the time, Jonathan muttered, though he couldn't help smiling. On the contrary, Lyra said, it's exactly the time. They need to see us as we are, not as threats, not as specimens, but as, she paused, searching for the word. People, Jonathan finished, different but still people. Reed nodded slowly. Point taken. Colonel Rogg, he addressed the female officer, prepare for civilian transport. Dr. Blackwood, we have a facility about an hour from here, state-of-the-art medical equipment, full living quarters, and yes, electromagnetic shielding. And I won't be trapped there? Lyra asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. You'd be free to leave anytime, Reed confirmed, though I suspect you'll find our resources useful, especially as your condition progresses. Jonathan looked at Lyra, really looked at her, in the harsh military spotlights. Her skin shimmered like stars on water, and her eyes held universes of possibility. She met his gaze and smiled. Your heartbeat says you've already decided, she murmured. Stop doing that, he whispered back, but there was no real annoyance in it. Never, she replied, then turned to Reed. We accept, Director. But first, Jonathan and I need a moment alone. Reed nodded, gesturing for his people to step back. Once they had relative privacy, Lyra turned to Jonathan, her skin creating dancing patterns in the night air. Before we go, she said, her voice carrying that musical quality that made his spine tingle, there's something you should know about my species bonding process. More surprises? Jonathan raised an eyebrow. Haven't we had enough of those today? The child isn't the only connection forming between us, she explained, stepping closer, the air crackled with energy. The genetic compatibility, it creates a resonance. Surely you felt it? The electricity when we touch? Jonathan's breath caught as she traced a finger along his arm, leaving trails of light in its wake. I thought that was just your natural energy. Partially, she smiled, her pattern shifting to a warmer hue, but it's stronger with you. The closer we are, the more intense it becomes, like now. She leaned in, and the air between them seemed to hum. Jonathan could feel his heart racing, and from Lyra's knowing smile, she could too. You're doing this on purpose, he accused softly. Of course, she admitted shamelessly. Your reactions are fascinating, the way your pupils dilate, your pulse quickens. She tilted her head. Is this not how Earth people express interest? It's usually more subtle. Subtle is inefficient. Her fingers found his chest again, right over his heart. Why waste time pretending not to want what you want? Because Jonathan struggled to maintain his train of thought as the energy between them intensified, because relationships here take time, trust, understanding. We're about to have plenty of time, she pointed out, and I already trust you with my life, with our child's life. Her other hand cupped his cheek, sending sparks across his skin. As for understanding, I understand that your body responds to me in ways that defy your human science. That's not fair, he managed, even as he leaned into her touch. No, she smiled mischievously, should I stop? In answer, Jonathan closed the distance between them, kissing her properly this time. The energy that had been crackling in the air seemed to surge through them both, making his entire body tingle with electricity. When they finally parted, Lyra's skin was glowing brighter than ever. I believe, she said, slightly breathless, your Earth saying is I told you so. We're going to have to work on your timing, Jonathan laughed, aware of the military personnel pretending not to watch them. And maybe your sense of privacy. Privacy is another inefficient Earth concept, she declared, but stepped back slightly, though I suppose we should focus on securing our safety first, and then, her smile held promises that made his heart race all over again, and then, Dr. Blackwood, you can teach me more about these Earth concepts, especially the ones that make your pulse race like that. The military convoy moved through the night, their vehicles cushioned against the rough road. Inside the specialized transport, Jonathan watched Lyra study the passing landscape through bulletproof glass, her skin casting a soft glow throughout the compartment, creating an almost otherworldly atmosphere. Your cities are so bright, she observed, pressing her hand against the window, like scattered stars on the ground. Wait until you see them up close, Jonathan replied, then caught himself, if they let us, I mean, they will. Lyra turned to face him, her geometric pattern shifting thoughtfully. Director Reed fears us more than he wants to control us. Fear can be useful. I'm not sure that's comforting. No, she slid closer to him on the seat, the air immediately charging with that familiar electricity. Would you prefer I comfort you in other ways? Jonathan glanced nervously at the driver's partition. There are cameras in here, you know. Yes, she agreed, seemingly unbothered. They've been recording my energy pattern since we entered. Quite primitive technology, really. Her fingers found his knee. They can't detect the subtle frequencies, though, like how your body temperature rises when I do this. Lyra, he warned, but couldn't help smiling. Your species has such interesting contradictions, she mused. Your body says yes while your words say no. Is this what you call playing hard to get? It's what we call professional behavior. Ah, she nodded sagely, another inefficient concept, like privacy and subtlety. Before Jonathan could respond, the vehicle slowed, turning onto a hidden road. Through the windows, they could see a massive complex emerging from the darkness, surrounded by high walls and security checkpoints. Home sweet home, the driver announced through the intercom, for now, at least. Lyra's hand found Jonathan's, squeezing gently. Together, she asked, and for the first time, he heard a hint of uncertainty in her voice. Together, he confirmed, squeezing back, though maybe with less public displays of alien affection. Her laugh filled the vehicle with musical notes that made the driver glance back in surprise. We'll see, Dr. Blackwood, we'll see. The facility surprised them both. Instead of the sterile military quarters Jonathan had expected, Director Reed led them to what could only be described as a luxury apartment within the complex's secure wing. We believe comfort is essential for your unique situation, Reed explained, scanning his badge at a sleek door, especially given your condition, Miss Lyra. The doors slid open silently, revealing a spacious living area bathed in warm, adjustable lighting. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a spectacular view of the surrounding forest, though Jonathan suspected they were heavily reinforced. The glass is photochromic and electromagnetically shielded, Reed confirmed, as if reading his thoughts. It can also turn opaque for privacy. Fascinating, Lyra moved to the windows, her reflection multiplying her glow, though your concept of shielding is rather basic. The living space flowed into an open-concept kitchen, equipped with state-of-the-art appliances. Everything was touch and voice-activated, with smooth surfaces in calming earth tones. 2 bedrooms, Reed continued, gesturing down a hallway, though you are free to use them as you see fit. He cleared his throat slightly. The main bedroom has been specially equipped with sensors to monitor any energy fluctuations. How thoughtful, Lyra smiled, making the director shift uncomfortably, though your sensors won't catch the most interesting fluctuations. Jonathan quickly stepped in. Is there a medical facility nearby? Through that door, Reed pointed to a subtle panel in the wall, full medical suite, private and secure. We thought you might prefer conducting any examinations in familiar surroundings. Your species is far more accommodating than I expected, Lyra observed, running her fingers along a countertop, where she touched small ripples of light followed her movement, though these materials respond quite nicely to energy manipulation. Please try not to redecorate molecularly, Jonathan said, only half joking. But it would be so much more efficient, she protested playfully, her skin brightening as she discovered the bedroom. Oh, this is lovely. The main bedroom was a masterpiece of modern design. A large bed dominated the space, its smart mattress promising perfect adjustment to any body type, human or otherwise. The ceiling was a geometric pattern of soft lights that seemed to complement Lyra's own luminescence. The bathroom includes both traditional facilities and some adaptations we thought might be useful, Reed explained. The water can be energetically charged, and there's a meditation space that can be electromagnetically isolated. Very thorough, Jonathan noted, impressed despite himself. We aim to be prepared for any situation. Reed headed toward the door. I'll leave you to settle in. The kitchen is fully stocked, and there's a tablet with facility information on the coffee table. Someone will come tomorrow to begin the official briefing. After he left, Lyra immediately began exploring every corner of their new home, her curiosity endearing and slightly concerning as she tested how different materials responded to her touch. Trying not to reorganize any molecular structures, Jonathan called after her, I'd like to still recognize the place tomorrow. Your human architecture is surprisingly resilient, she called back, though this bed could use some energetic enhancement. Lyra appeared in the doorway, her skin pulsing with what he was learning to recognize as amusement. Shall I show you what I mean? First, Jonathan said firmly, though he couldn't help smiling at her directness, we should probably eat something. It's been a long day. Ah, yes. Your human need for regular sustenance. Lyra floated toward the kitchen, her movements graceful despite her growing energy signature. Though I must admit, I'm curious about your earth food. That coffee substance was quite interesting. As they explored the kitchen together, Jonathan discovered it was fully stocked with everything from basic ingredients to gourmet prepared meals. The refrigerator's touchscreen offered detailed nutritional information and cooking instructions. This is all very elaborate, he mused, opening cabinets. They want us comfortable, Lyra observed, studying a bowl of fruit with intense interest. Comfortable subjects are more cooperative subjects. She picked up an apple, and it began to glow faintly in her hand. The molecular structure of your food is fascinating, so much potential energy. Please don't rewrite the apple's DNA, Jonathan said, taking it gently from her hand. Let's start with something simple. As he prepared a basic meal, Lyra perched on one of the sleek counter stools, watching him with undisguised fascination. The air around her rippled with energy, making the kitchen's smart displays flicker occasionally. Your movements are very precise, she noted, like when you were treating my injuries. Do all humans prepare food with such care? I just like doing things properly. He paused, realizing he was falling into old habits from his medical days. Though I suppose some patterns never leave you. Like your pattern of avoiding personal conversations by focusing on tasks. Her voice held that musical, teasing quality that made his spine tingle. Says the alien who keeps trying to redecorate with energy pulses, he countered, serving their plates. Lyra's laugh sent pleasant vibrations through the room. Touché, as your people say. She studied the food before her. Though I noticed you didn't deny it. Before he could respond, she took a bite, and her eyes widened, her skin flared with bright patterns that danced across the kitchen walls. The molecular interaction is incredible. She took another bite with enthusiasm. We have nothing like this where I come from. Our nutrition is much more efficient. There's that word again, Jonathan chuckled, sitting beside her. Not everything needs to be efficient, you know. No, she turned to face him, their knees touching, that familiar electricity spark between them, like how your heart rate increases inefficiently when we're close. You're never going to stop pointing that out, are you? Never, she agreed cheerfully. It's one of your most endearing reactions, though not your only one. 3 weeks into their stay at the facility, Jonathan woke to the sound of urgent knocking. Lyra was already awake, her skin pulsing with concerned patterns as she stared at the tablet screen. Jonathan, she said quietly, I believe what your people call the cat is out of the bag. He squinted at the tablet she handed him. The headline made his blood run cold, Alien Romance. Doctor's secret love child with extraterrestrial visitor. The knocking continued. Director Reed's voice came through the door. Dr. Blackwood, we have a situation. You could say that, Jonathan muttered, opening the door. Reed looked like he hadn't slept. Someone leaked photos from the military encounter, Reed said without preamble. The ones of you two being intimate. The kiss, Lyra supplied helpfully, though I still don't understand why that particular biological interaction causes such fascination among humans. Because it's all over every news network, Reed replied, turning on their living room's massive screen. Multiple news channels filled the display, all showing the same image, Lyra's glowing form embracing Jonathan at the Henderson farm, their silhouettes backlit by military spotlights. Alien seductress compromises American doctor. First human-alien hybrid, miracle or menace? Breaking, government hiding alien pregnancy program. Oh dear, Lyra observed, watching the headline scroll. Your species really does love its drama. This isn't funny. Jonathan ran his hands through his hair. Our security has been compromised, Reed finished. We're already investigating the leak, but that's not our biggest problem. He gestured to the windows, where they could see a growing crowd beyond the facility's gates. The media found us. Lyra moved to the window, her reflection overlaying the scene outside. They're afraid, she said softly, but also hopeful. The emotional signatures are quite mixed. Social media is exploding, Reed continued. Half the population thinks you're the next step in human evolution, the other half is calling for military intervention. What do you suggest? Jonathan asked, joining Lyra at the window. We need to control the narrative, Reed replied, give an official statement, maybe an interview with a trusted journalist. No, Lyra turned, her skin brightening with determination, not one interview. Let them all see, let them ask their questions. If they fear us, it's because they don't understand. That's incredibly risky, Reed protested. Life is risky, she countered, her hand finding Jonathan's. Isn't that right, Doctor? Jonathan felt the familiar spark of their touch, saw the way her pattern shifted to match his heartbeat. She's right, no more hiding. Besides, Lyra added with that mischievous tone he'd grown to love, I'm quite photogenic when I glow. The press conference was set up in the facility's main auditorium. Jonathan watched from backstage as reporters filed in, their cameras and equipment creating a forest of technology. Lyra stood beside him, seemingly fascinated by the chaos. Your heart is racing again, she observed, her skin pulsing gently, though not from attraction this time. Not exactly, no, he admitted. Last time I spoke publicly was at a medical conference. This is different. Because I'm alien? She tilted her head. Or because I'm carrying your child? Because last time I didn't have the fate of interspecies relations riding on my ability to not sound crazy. Lyra laughed, the sound making nearby equipment buzz slightly. Then let me do the talking. I'm quite good at making humans receptive. That's what I'm afraid of, Jonathan muttered, but couldn't help smiling. Director Reed approached, looking tense. We're ready. Remember the guidelines, no mention of military involvement, keep the focus on the medical aspects, and try not to cause any electromagnetic disruptions. Lyra recited. Though I can't promise anything about that last part. The child seems to enjoy affecting your technology. As if to prove her point, the stage lights flickered briefly. Just try to be diplomatic, Reed sighed. Oh, I'm always diplomatic, Lyra smiled, aren't I, Jonathan? As diplomatic as a supernova, he replied dryly. They stepped onto the stage together, and the room erupted in camera flashes and shouted questions. Lyra's skin brightened instinctively, creating a soft aura that made every photograph look slightly ethereal. Ladies and gentlemen, Reed began from the podium. Dr. Jonathan Blackwood and his companion, Lyra, will now take your questions. 100 hands shot up. Lyra stepped forward, her voice carrying that subtle harmonic that made everyone lean in slightly. Yes, she said, pointing to a reporter in the front, the one whose heart just skipped with excitement. The reporter blinked, startled. Right. Is it true you're carrying a human-alien hybrid? I'm carrying a child, Lyra corrected, her tone gentle but firm, one that represents the potential of both our species. Though I must say, your term hybrid seems rather clinical for something born of love, doesn't it? The room fell silent for a moment, then erupted again with questions. Miss Lyra, another reporter called out, there are concerns about potential dangers. How can Earth be sure this isn't the first step in an invasion? Before Reed could intervene, Lyra's laugh filled the room with musical notes that made several cameras malfunction. If we wanted to invade, she said, still chuckling, would we really start with making one doctor fall in love? Fall in, that wasn't in the briefing, Reed muttered behind them. Jonathan stepped forward. Look, I understand the concerns. I'm a doctor, a scientist. If someone had told me 3 months ago I'd be standing here. He glanced at Lyra, who was literally glowing with approval, but sometimes, the most extraordinary discoveries come from unexpected places. Dr. Blackwood, a stern-looking woman stood up, you violated multiple medical ethics codes. How do you justify your actions? By saving my life, Lyra interjected, her skin pattern shifting to more intense frequencies. Several reporters' phones started playing random music. Oh, sorry about that. The baby gets excited sometimes. The crowd murmured as cameras zoomed in on her softly glowing abdomen. Would you be willing to undergo medical examination? Someone shouted. I already have my doctor, Lyra replied, giving Jonathan a look that made his cheeks flush, though his examination techniques are sometimes distracted by elevated heart rates. Lyra. Jonathan whispered. Maybe less about the heart rates. But they're so interesting, she protested, loud enough for everyone to hear. Like now, it's doing that flutter thing that happens when you're embarrassed. Humans have such fascinating physiological responses. The younger reporters were trying not to laugh while the older ones looked scandalized. Reed appeared to be developing a headache. Perhaps we should focus on the scientific implications? Jonathan suggested desperately. Of course, Lyra agreed cheerfully, though I find your species' separation of science and emotion quite inefficient. For example, did you know that love actually enhances genetic compatibility? The hormones produced during attraction create the perfect environment for. I think that's enough scientific detail for now, Reed cut in quickly. The press conference went viral within hours. Clips of Lyra's candid responses and her playful teasing of Jonathan's physiological reactions became instant social media sensations. Your species is fascinating, Lyra observed the next morning, scrolling through reactions on their tablet. They've created thousands of these memes about us. Look, this one shows your blushing face with the caption when your alien girlfriend exposes your heart rate in public. Wonderful, Jonathan groaned, but couldn't help smiling. At least they're laughing with us, not at us. Director Reed arrived with an unexpected proposal. The public response has been surprisingly positive. We think you should start a video blog. Controlled content, but personal. Let people see the real story. And so, Life with Lyra was born. Their first video, filmed in their apartment, began simply. Greetings, Earth. Lyra waved at the camera, her skin creating mesmerizing patterns. Today, I'll explain why human medical equipment keeps malfunctioning around me. Jonathan, dear, could you demonstrate with that heart monitor? I don't think, Jonathan started. Oh, look, it's already showing elevated readings, she interrupted gleefully, though that might be because I'm sitting so close. The comments exploded, they're so cute, it hurts. Finally, an alien who tells it like it is. Dr. Blackwood's face when she teases him. Each video brought new revelations. Lyra explained her biology, demonstrated her abilities while trying not to short out too many cameras, and shared stories about her world. Jonathan provided medical context and increasingly amused commentary. Today, Lyra announced in their most viewed episode, we'll discuss the baby's development. Jonathan, show them the special ultrasound you designed. The image showed a perfect blend of human and alien characteristics, surrounded by a gentle glow. Social media erupted with joy and wonder, your child is going to be gorgeous. Science is amazing. First human-alien family goals. As their following grew, so did their influence. Scientific institutions began reaching out, religious leaders sought dialogue, even skeptics found it hard to maintain their fear in the face of Lyra's charming directness and Jonathan's obvious devotion. Their most significant breakthrough came during a live stream about the pregnancy's progression. As you can see, Lyra explained, her abdomen glowing with intricate patterns, the baby's energy signature has developed its own unique frequency. And, Jonathan explained, what happened to your coffee maker this morning? It started brewing automatically, Jonathan admitted, and somehow made the perfect cup without being turned on. The child already knows your preferences, Lyra beamed, though I still don't understand your attachment to that bitter bin water. The chat exploded with heart emojis and excited comments. But then, Lyra's expression shifted, her patterns brightening suddenly. Oh, speaking of the baby, she grabbed Jonathan's hand and placed it on her stomach. The entire live stream feed flickered. Are you okay? Jonathan asked, his doctor mode engaging instantly. Better than okay. She laughed. The baby's responding to your touch. Look at the energy readings. The medical equipment behind them lit up like a Christmas tree, displays showing unprecedented patterns of human and alien biological markers, perfectly synchronized. This is remarkable, Jonathan muttered, his scientific mind racing. The hybrid DNA seems to be creating entirely new energy signatures. Your scientists would say impossible, Lyra teased, but then, they said the same about us, didn't they? The video went viral, catching the attention of the highest levels of government. A week later, Director Reed arrived with unprecedented news. The president has signed an executive order, he announced, looking both relieved and amazed. Full citizenship rights for Lyra and the child. You're officially Earth's first registered extraterrestrial residents. How efficient, Lyra commented, making Jonathan laugh. There are conditions, Reed continued. Regular medical checkups, continued documentation of the pregnancy, cooperation with our scientists. As long as Jonathan remains my primary physician, Lyra insisted. His heart rate is very reliable for monitoring my condition. You're never going to stop with the heart rate comments, are you? Jonathan asked. Never, she smiled, her skin pulsing in sync with his heartbeat. It's your most honest feature. Like now, it's doing that happy flutter that means, I think Director Reed gets the idea, Jonathan interrupted hastily. Reed cleared his throat. Right, well, I'll leave you to process the news. Oh, and the president might want to do a congratulatory video call. Try not to short out the White House communication system. After he left, Lyra turned to Jonathan, her pattern shifting to that particular frequency he'd learned meant she was deeply moved. Your world accepted us, she said softly. Despite everything, they chose hope over fear. Welcome back to life with Lyra, Jonathan spoke to the camera, sitting in their renovated farmhouse living room. The old house had been transformed, blending Earth comfort with subtle alien aesthetics, geometric patterns that glowed faintly in sync with Lyra's presence. Today's update is special. We're finally home. Lyra added, her skin creating gentle auroras that danced across the walls. The camera panned to show their view. The sprawling yard now bloomed with both earth flowers and strange, luminescent plants that Lyra had carefully cultivated. The Henderson farm had become something entirely new, a perfect fusion of two worlds. And we have something to show you, Jonathan continued, pulling up the latest ultrasound image. The baby's form was clearly visible now, surrounded by swirling patterns of light. As you can see, the hybrid DNA has stabilized beautifully. The energy signature is completely unique, though the little one already has preferences. Lyra laughed as nearby electronics hummed in response to her touch. Especially for your Earth music. Classical, of course. Very discriminating taste. Like mother, like child. Jonathan smiled, and the medical display flickered in what had become a familiar response to their interaction. Your heart's doing the flutter thing again, Lyra noted with characteristic directness. Should we tell them our other news? We're establishing a research center, Jonathan explained to the camera, a place where human and alien medicine can be studied together, where others like Lyra, if they come, can find help and understanding, and where certain doctors can finally stop running from their calling. Lyra added softly, her hand finding his. The air sparked between them, as it had since that first night. Speaking of running, Jonathan turned to her, your energy signature has been different today. Something you want to share? Lyra's pattern shifted to a new configuration, one he'd never seen before. Well, considering your species' love of dramatic revelations, she guided his hand to her abdomen, where the glow had intensified. It seems our little one might arrive sooner than expected. The medical equipment behind them lit up like a showcase of Christmas lights. Jonathan's expression transformed from confusion to wonder as he read the displays. Are you saying that your child has decided to be as efficiently direct as its mother? Yes, her skin rippled with joy. I believe your Earth phrase is any day now. The camera caught Jonathan's face transitioning through about 5 different emotions before settling on pure happiness. Around them, the house seemed to pulse with shared energy, human, alien, and something beautifully in between. And that's all for today, Lyra announced to their viewers, her glow brightening the entire room. We have some preparing to do, though I'm sure Jonathan's heart rate will tell you all about it in our next update. You're never going to stop mentioning that, are you? Never, she confirmed, leaning in to kiss him as the camera caught their mingled auras, creating patterns of light that would soon become famous across the globe, the first visual proof that love truly knows no planetary bounds. The footage ended with a wide shot of their home at sunset, where earth flowers and alien plants bloomed side by side, and the soft glow from within promised a future brighter than anyone could have imagined. The truth about Lyra's pursuers emerged gradually during one of their private moments months after settling into their new life. She finally explained the full story to Jonathan. My people never actually came for me, she said, her pattern shifting to a more solemn frequency, because they couldn't. What do you mean? Jonathan asked, noting how her energy signature dimmed slightly. The war I fled, it ended shortly after I left, not in victory or defeat, but in mutual destruction. Her voice carried a deep sadness. Both sides depleted their tracking capabilities in the final battle. Their ability to detect dimensional signatures across galaxies was lost. Why didn't you tell me sooner? Lyra's skin rippled with complex emotions. At first, I wasn't sure. Interstellar communications are complicated. Then, when I confirmed it through certain energy patterns I can still detect, she paused, I didn't want to burden you with the knowledge that I'm possibly the last of my kind. Except you're not, Jonathan said softly, placing his hand on her glowing abdomen, not anymore. No, she agreed, her patterns brightening, our child represents something new, a future I never expected but now can't imagine living without. The baby's energy signature pulsed in response, making the nearby lights flicker. Though I must admit, she added with her characteristic directness, your Earth turned out to be a far better refuge than I anticipated, especially the part where I found a doctor with compatible DNA and an endearingly reactive heart rate. And there it is, Jonathan laughed, I was wondering how long you could go without mentioning my heart rate. About as long as you can go without checking the medical monitors, she teased back. Speaking of which, the story of her world's fate remained their private truth, a bittersweet foundation for their new beginning. While Earth debated and celebrated their union, only they knew that their child represented not just a bridge between worlds, but the continuation of a legacy that might otherwise have been lost to the stars.